Hello explorers, thanks for joining us again and welcome back to another exciting and informative video on our YouTube channel. If you are joining us for the first time, we want to thank you for watching. In this episode, I will be looking at the reason why several African countries have decided that France will no longer continue to exploit its natural resources in the region, and the reason why France's presence and geopolitical activities have been exposed in several ways. I will discuss this from the historical perspective. I will bring to you analytical information, illustrate to you as the reason why the events in the continent of Africa will continue to unfold until France withdraw its presence in the region in a significant way. So I will encourage you to watch this video to the end for clarity and better understanding. So without any more delay, let's just dive straight into it. In 1977, when Djibouti gained its independence after 115 years of brutal French occupation, the era of European colonialism in Africa had almost come to an end. Only small enclaves occupied by Spain and Britain remained. Like other colonizers, France had not left its former colonies before making sure that it could exploit their wealth and maintain a form of authority over them, and also thus access all kinds of natural resources which do not exist in Europe under an unofficial policy referred to as Franc CFA. France has maintained ties with politicians and also officials put in power across the former colonies after the independence movement of the 1950s and 1960s. This policy also extended to include businessmen from France, enabled to create businesses and become commercial partners, working for the benefits of their masters in Paris, France. During its colonial era, like others, France enslaved its African subjects, killing millions of them and sold millions of others into slave trade. France imposed its language and culture and kept Africans illiterate and poor. Before ending its colonialism, it put in place a new form of control, economic and political colonialism. Moving forward, earlier this month, if you look at the information considering our research, two African analysts told the BBC News that the historical record of France provides some support for those grievances in the region. French colonial rule established political system designed to extract valuable resources while using repressive and strategies to retain control. They also went ahead to say that France forged defense agreements that saw it regularly intervene militarily on behalf of unpopular pro-French leaders to keep them in power, as the case in Ivory Coast Gbagbo era. If you look at other areas, France completely ignored the people whose wealth it had been stealing. So when an ambitious leader rose through the ranks and also called for giving a reasonable portion of the country's wealth back to its people, he was either toppled or killed based on historical information. Since 1963, if you look at other areas, France has assassinated more than 22 African presidents who refused its colonial power and also attempted to redefine the independence of their countries. France intelligence services, believed to be carrying out coups and murders in the continent of Africa, have been known very well by Africans. Following the recent coup in Niger, former permanent representative to the African Union missions in Washington, D.C. in the United States of America, Dr. Arikana Chambori-Kwo from Zimbabwe, explained, if you, in quote in our own words, if you are an African president coming to power, you are told as long as you stay away from discussions pertaining to their French presence and also military presence in the country, training of your military by France, equipping of your military by France. Do not talk about the natural resources whose French companies have the first right of approval. Do not talk about or make sure that you continue to deposit your money in the bank's reserves with French central bank in Paris. If you avoid those areas, then you are free to run your country and any way that you want to run that particular country based on her own perspective. The late French president Jacques Chirac acknowledged that without Africa, France will slide down into the ranks of a third world power. In an address on 26 July 2007, then French President Nicolas Sarkozy said the colonials come and looted, helped themselves, exploited, took resources and wealth that did not belong to them. They stripped the colonized of their personalities, of their freedom, of their land, and of the fruits of their labor. But France has continued to deal with Africa in this way, while claiming it is sending aid, spreading democracy, and defending Africans against terrorist attack. However, it does not address any of those people's problems, including violence, poverty, lack of economic opportunities, poor education system, and poor infrastructure. The West African countries, which were French former colonies, are the poorest countries in the world, despite the fact that they had richest in terms of natural resources. The democracy that France seeks to maintain in that particular region and to protection of the France leadership in the particular area is as a result of the France-Afrique Accord. We required a secret coordination and interaction at the upper echelons of those particular French-speaking countries' president. France continued to speak and lecture all the African capitals. If you look at other areas, the continued deterioration of security in most West African countries proves that the claim that forces are defending African nations against terrorism is just a pretext for maintaining military power on their soil. After the wave of recent coups, which were apparently orchestrated by Paris, France felt as though it was facing the prospects of being sidelined by African strategists who have been looking for other partners. A report by Economist Intelligence stated France is fully aware of Africa's long-term economic potential and their commercial threat posed by others looking to build their own economic and financial links to the continent of Africa. Former African Union representative Quo formally said, "It is unbelievable that to this day you can have a country like Niger to be the second poorest country in the world and yet all their resources are going to France. At every level, it is unfair, unacceptable, and I don't know how the West powers to sleep every day knowing of the carnage, the havoc they are creating in Africa, and hope that this will continue forever." If you look at Niger, Niger has become the latest country in West Africa where a corrupt and pro-France leader has been ousted. Previously, Burkina Faso, Guinea, Mali, and Chad, all former French colonies, ousted pro-French leaders and pushed French forces out of their land. This trend is likely to continue, and Africans will be cautious when they deal with new partners in order not to repeat the same mistakes committed by their former colonizers. If you look at the events on the ground, as Africa goes through a transition period with regards to its own geopolitical interaction with Western countries, African countries are no longer what they used to be several years ago. If you look at the current events in the region, African countries are speaking out, sending a strong message, particularly to France, that the exploitation would not continue. Niger, Burkina Faso, and also Mali, and you look at what happened in Gabon and also in Guinea. This is not new. This has been broiling in the dark for several years, and France is aware of this. At the moment, France continues to drag its presence in Niger, looking at the situation with its ambassador. Hopefully that the current situation in Niger will translate into handing power back into civilian government, but at the moment, African nations to approach France cautiously.
Into the conversation, your book, the book you edited, is titled A History of France Afrique, the Empire That Does Not Want to Die. So, Thomas, if you could respond to what Daniel Mangera has said, in particular about the military in Gabon and the relationship of its military to France. France has reportedly a series of agreements with the militaries of many of its former colonies. It's been 60 years, over 60 years, since most of France's African colonies have gained independence, most of which were in 1960, including Gabon. But since then, France has intervened militarily more than 50 times on the continent. So if you could begin first by just talking about the relationship between the military and France, the Gabonese military in France.
Yes, thank you very much to having me on your show. I think it's very important to go back and to know history to understand what's happening right now in Gabon in particular, but in French-speaking Africa in general. I think it's important to know the history of what we call this France Afrique. In one word, this term, one word, sums up the extremely close relationship, the fusional relationship that France managed to maintain with its former colony in Africa, despite or thanks to the fake independence it granted to its former colonies in 1960. And Gabon is the extreme example of these fake independence. You might maybe you know that the first head of state of Gabon was not Omar Bongo but Léon Mba. Léon Mba was a guy who was nominated by the French and who refused independence. He didn't want to have his country independent. It's the French who forced him to accept independence, and they said to him explicitly, "Don't worry, it's not a true independence. We'll give you independence, but at the same time, you will have to sign what we call cooperation agreements." So, in fact, we give you independence, freedom with the left hand, but we're taking it back with the right hand with these the cooperation agreements. And these cooperation agreements are at the heart of what we see today. These cooperation agreements allowed France to maintain its military apparatus in their former colonies, to maintain the colonial monetary system beyond the independence, and to intervene militarily wherever it pleased. And there had been a first coup in Gabon in 1964, and the French intervened militarily to put Léon Mba, this guy Léon Mba, back on his presidential chair, and then they immediately began to prepare the accession to power of his vice president Albert Bongo at this time, the future Omar Bongo, who was installed in 1967. And the presidential guard itself was trained and formed by the French militaries back in the 1960s. So the independence of Gabon has never been real. And we have to bear that in mind, otherwise we can't understand what's happening right now.
And just to elaborate further on that term that's in your title, France Afrique, that is a term. It also, fric means sort of money. And so it's like France's piggy bank, that's what Africa is. Is that fair to say? In addition to being one word, France is Africa, said here now with irony.
Yeah, this France Afrique was permitted, had the goal to secure access to strategic raw materials, oil, of course, gas, uranium, manganese, gold, etc., etc. So France could maintain its grip on its former colonies and Gabon in particular, and because the Gabonese elite became very, very rich thanks to that France-African system, it could send back money to the ex-metropole France and to secretly finance the political scene, people from the left and people from the right, and try to influence the political life in France. And Omar Bongo was very, very good at this game. And one day on the French radio, he said, France can't do anything. Can't do harm to me because I know so many secrets, and among these secrets was the question of the financing of the French political scene.
If you look at Senegal, Ivory Coast, and also other countries that are also strongly engaged with France, should approach the coordination and relationship with France at a very careful and cautious way. We want to thank you for watching. If you are joining us for the first time, we encourage you to check some of our informative videos on the YouTube channel. We are looking forward to meeting you soon in our next episode. Have a good day. Bye-bye.